Hey everybody, welcome to another article that they just dropped literally like 10 minutes ago, I think. This is Season 20 Weapon Tuning Preview. I haven't read this at all, I just saw that it was up. And I'm like, I gotta read this. So, I'm just gonna get right into it. I'm gonna just skim over and read everything about all the different types of weapons and stuff. Not really gonna do all the extra. Blah blah blah. Okay, so weapon archetypes. When playing on console, your reticle will turn red when it's over an enemy that's inside your weapon's effective range. This is a useful visual aid that we wanted to be global for a while. So we've also enabled this on PC. In the future season, we'll be making this color customizable, similar to the base reticle color. Red reticle is now enabled on PC, so that's kind of cool. Linear fusion rifles. You probably saw this coming. Linear fusion rifles outperform other heavy weapons for boss damage by a wide margin and have had plenty of time in the sun. We're bringing them down enough for other options to compete. At the same time, exotic heavy linear fusion rifles don't do enough to justify using one over a legendary, so they're not being affected by this nerf. So what's it called? The big heavy one. I can't remember what it's called. Reduced damage versus what is that called? That's gonna really make me angry. I have to look. Reduced damage versus champions, mini bosses, bosses, and vehicles by 15%. So 15% nerf. It's right there. Fuck. Sleeper simulant and queenbreakers are unaffected. Sleeper fans, this is not a drill. So sleeper simulant, I feel like is just gonna be a good option overall now. Literally just because of this nerf. Machine guns. Machine guns have been buffed a few times over the past year or so, but not only in PvE. We've opted to increase their base damage a little, which makes them more forgiving to use in PvP. The buff also applies. Okay, I have some thoughts about that. I think the buff also applies across the board in PvE. PvP damage is typically the base, and PvE has multipliers on top of that. We'll also simultaneously increase machine guns reserves. Substantially. Wow, I can't read. Gun reserves, giving them a higher uptime, particularly useful in hard content. Okay, so it might be worth getting a machine gun now. Okay. Increased damage by 10% with the falling effects on time to kill against guardians with tier 6 resilience. Oh, I hope we have some resilience stuff that we'll talk about. Oh, well, we kind of already did. Anyway, high impact, TDK reduced. Okay, so this is all PvP stuff. I'm not really going to go over that. Increased reserve ammo by 50% and 20% at a 100 inventory stat. The inventory stat is a 0 to 100 value behind the scenes. Okay. Heavy grenade launchers. Heavy grenade launchers haven't been touched in a while and substantially below some other heavy options for damage. On top of that, grenade launcher projectiles have travel time, a ballistic arc, and a relatively small blast radius, so it can be hard to consistently land shots on a moving target, and they may hit fewer targets with the explosion than you'd expect. With this change, heavy grenade launchers should be significantly more useful in PvE and easier to use in both PvE and PvP. Increased damage versus champions, mini-bosses, bosses, and vehicles by 20% and miners by 40%. Improved projectile collision, making it slightly easier to land hits. Increased blast radius by 1 meter. Parasite is unaffected. It does huge damage already, right? So, wow. 20% is fairly decent. Because they already do okay damage, I guess, but definitely not near like rockets, even like swords. Well, that's more just lament, but rockets and of course linear. So this being brought up and obviously linears being brought down is going to be so huge. Shotguns. The new shotgun reticles show the correct spread pattern, but is in shipping form. The size of the reticle isn't affected by the current spread angle. This change should make the reticle accurate in most ways at 85 degree field of view. Change to make this accurate for all field of view options will come in a future season. So they'll change. So no buffs or anything for shotguns. A little disappointing, but that's okay. Okay, kinetic weapons. Oh, I see stuff about exotics. Kinetic weapons. Kinetic slot weapons have always done 5% more damage versus unshielded targets in PvE. This meant that kinetic slot stasis weapons were straight up better, with extra functionality and no downside. We wanted to give players more of a reason to run kinetic damage weapons. So instead of a blanket kinetic slot damage boost, we're switching to a kinetic damage type boost based on whether your kinetic weapon uses primary or special ammo. And increase the bonus significantly. So kinetic primary weapon damage multiplier increased from 1.05 to 1.1. Kinetic special weapon damage multiplier increased from 1.05 to 1.15. Kinetic slot stasis weapons no longer have the 5% damage bonus versus unshielded targets in PvE. And there's also a kinetic damage type perk coming in Lightfall. Interesting. So there's going to be a reason to run like Fate Breakers or, like Smite Marines over just they're good, they're fun guns or, they're nostalgic guns. Interesting. Okay, so exotics now. Here we go. Just like many players, we want exotic weapons that have a strong theming around their damage type to use the real subclass 3.0 verbs. And Lightfall's longer development and playtest cycle gave us the opportunity to add subclass verbs to many of the top picks. Our goals with adding subclass 3.0 verbs is to this grant these weapons additional functionality and let them tie into subclass builds in a more meaningful way. In most cases, this is also a hefty buff. Okay, so the queenbreakers bow, or just the queenbreakers now, blinding effect was underwhelming for a heavy weapon, so we've changed how it's deployed. Note that queenbreaker was also not affected by the global damage reduction, making it substantially stronger by comparison. Shot now chains to nearby enemies using Arc 3.0 blind. I don't know how well that's gonna be. It's more that kind of seems like it's an ad clear weapon. I don't know how I feel about that. Ruinous effigies feels very voidy, and slamming the transmutation sphere was an obvious place to put an additional effect. So now that slam attack now suppresses. That's a pretty good change. Being able to suppress that will proc volatile for some builds. That's interesting. Leviathan's breath. Buff from a few seasons back inadvertently reduced the PvP damage enough that it could no longer one-hit kill players in their super with a headshot. We fixed that, but also added volatile and increased the damage versus champions substantially to highlight its anti-champion role. Now implies volatile on a perfect draw, increases damage that allows to one-hit people in PvP in their super. Increases damage versus champions by 30%. So this thing is gonna be like a champion slayer come Lightfall. It's gonna be cool. 1,000. I see something about Sunshot. 1,000 Voices was briefly a top pick for season 14, but was eclipsed by other options since then. We wanted to lean even more into the chain of Solar Explosion by adding Scorch, and with the global heavy weapon changes, this is also a strong option. If you have Ember of Ashes equipped, landing a full burst of a single target will trigger an ignition immediately. Okay. Each explosion now applies 10 plus 5 Scorch stacks. Interesting. Oh, that's with Ember of Ashes. Okay. Sunshot was a top candidate for applying solar subclass verbs, and the explosions are a clear place to add to. Explosion on kill now applies 10 plus 5 Scorch stacks. Okay, so it's getting a buff. It was already a pretty good add clear weapon. Polaris Lance has always had a burn effect, so it was an obvious change to switch this to Scorch. Perfect Fifth shots now apply 40 plus 20 Scorch stacks instead of a custom burn. Nice. Two-tailed Fox had rough competition as a heavy exotic weapon, but now it's the only weapon that can apply subclass verbs from multiple damage types without extra steps. Solar Rocket now applies 60 plus 30 Scorch stacks instead of a burn, and the Void Rocket already applies Suppress, and the Catalyst completes this trifecta. Wait, what? What does that mean? Does that mean it's getting an Arc Catalyst? What? Interesting. Prometheus Lens has utility with its 3.0 rework, but we wanted to give it something more spectacular on kills. In addition, added Incandescent. That thing's going to be so much fun to use now that it has Incandescent. Oh my god, I can't wait for these changes. Granite Overture's latest buff brought it up plenty and needed his blind, so now it will have blind. Interesting. Okay, so hipfire reticles. We're starting to experiment with hipfire weapon reticles, conveying more information and using the Manticore as a testbed for this. You can expect to see more weapon type or exotic weapon functionality showing up in hipfire reticles in Season 21 and beyond. Added a reticle element to the Manticore, showing current stacks of anti-grav repulsor. Okay, now we're getting on to perks here. With Strand coming to the game along with the new Strand weapon damage perk, we've updated a couple of older perks. Osmosis now works with Strand. Elemental Capacitor now has the following effect while using a Strand subclass. Airborne Effectiveness. They're really leaning into this airborne effectiveness stuff, and it's just oof. Rewind rounds will be appearing on more weapons than Lightfall, but it has custom built to only work with the Voltaglass weapon set. We've tweaked it to be a more general purpose. So it will be rebuilt on non-Voltaglass weapons. Okay. Eager Edge has some bugs that needed to address in a previous release. We've now taken the time to do a more complete rework, which also let us reduce or remove most of the restrictions that were in place. No longer deactivates when moving faster than 35 meters a second. What? Deactivates correctly after a single melee swing, so you can't do like the double anymore. Reduce the base lunge distance buff from 2 to 1.8. That's not too bad. Reduce airborne lunge, and that's just on the ground, so whatever. Reduce airborne lunge penalty distance penalty from 25% to 20%. The enhanced perk now increases lunge distance slightly back up to 2. So it's gonna be the same for anyone who has the crafted version, so that doesn't really matter. Blinding grenades on on grenade launchers don't do arc damage, so it's not appropriate for them to trigger arc 3.0 blind effects. We didn't feel the need to change their disorienting effect though. So we've updated the name to overlap less. Renamed blinding grenades to disorienting grenades. So it's the same thing, does the same thing, except they're not called blinding grenades anymore. Vice Stinger is one of the most desirable origin traits in the game, on linear fusion rifles particularly, to the point where it makes it hard for non-viced weapons to compete. It needed some adjustment. With this change, it's still valuable, but more in line with other origin traits. Now it only reloads 25% of the magazine. I see why. It was pretty busted, especially on that fire and forget linear fusion rifle where you could any one of the bursts was 3 shots, so it makes sense. We're already hard at work at season 21 and 22, and some of the changes we're making include adding a full auto melee accessibility setting. I feel like that'd be weird for like bonk titans. A pass over weapon type and exotic weapon hipfire reticles. That's interesting, including increasing how visibility they change even at high FOV, and adding features like charge meters and exotic perk counters. We've also got balance changes in the works, but it's a little too early to get into them. We will have more information to share post Lightfall. Okay, that's a super interesting article. Not a twab because it's Wednesday. So yeah. A lot of it I saw coming, obviously, with the linear fusion rifle nerf. The machine gun buff I wasn't expecting, and it's kind of okay. With more ammo, it's nice, obviously. Heavy grenade launcher, I knew that was coming. I just, for whatever reason, felt that. And I'm glad. Nothing with rockets, which is fine. Nothing with sniper rifles either, which makes me big sad because I have a bunch of sniper rifles saved up for Lightfall, but they seem to be not getting any type of buff, which kind of blows. Shotguns really didn't get a buff inside of PvE. Kinetic weapon changes are kind of neat. That really allows me to use other things that aren't stasis related ones, which is kind of cool. The changes to the exotics to give them 3.0 verbs is really, really nice. And all the changes seem pretty good. This one's weird. The Eager Edge one is just like they didn't even like the only thing that really needed to be changed was the single melee swing, but even then it's like it was hard to pull off anyway, right? And like who cares? Like whatever. Um, and then just changing that name's whatever. So yeah, that's really it. I don't have a lot of thoughts on that. It was pretty expected. I'm a little disappointed. Nothing about snipers getting changed at all. No sniper meta, unfortunately. I'm excited with some of the catalysts, like the Prometheus lens one looks pretty cool. This two-tailed fox one, unless I'm like complete like if I'm dumb, like now it has Scorch and it has suppression, and the catalyst completes the trifecta, which leads me to believe we're getting a catalyst for this that's gonna have like blinding or like jolt or something. So it's got all 3 types of rocket, or like it fires a 3rd rocket or something, which would be crazy. So, well, which would defeat the purpose of its name, but whatever. So yeah, and this seems kind of interesting. I want to see how good Polaris Lance will be. But yeah, that's really it for this. Pretty excited for a lot of these changes. Some things I wish they would change, but obviously they said there's going to be more post Lightfall, so we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, thank you for coming and watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.